Hey there, this is Katherine Cartwright. Welcome to Crafter Party. I am going to jump right into my projects today. I'm going to be doing a lot of embossing. I was so excited to get this background, the crackle background, and I decided I would do several different things with some embossing. And then I'm also going to do some ink blending, and we're just going to have a lot of fun. So I've got a piece of Bristol cardstock. This is smooth Bristol cardstock that I'm using. This is what I prefer most of the time for everything because I'm going to do some ink blending on top of this embossing. But that's just one of the cardstocks I like to use a lot. So I'm going to ink this up with the clear glue pad, and I'm going to stamp this onto my cardstock. It is cut to the size of a slimline card, a little bit smaller. So this is 3 1/4 by 8 1/4. And I'm going to stamp this a couple of times. Since I'm using my stamp positioner, I'm able to do that. I've really come to depend on my stamp positioner. I used to never use it. I bought one, never used it. And then I finally decided to start pulling it out, and I love it because I can do things like this. I can't even tell you the number of times I've messed up embossing because I missed a spot or I didn't stamp it right. So this has really helped cut down on all of the mistakes that I make in my crafting room. So this is, I've got some white embossing powder. I'm going to sprinkle this all over my panel. It'll be a little hard to see until I heat it, but you can kind of see the reflection since it's white on that white paper. So as I pull it down, you can see a little bit of the pattern start to emerge, and I'm making a huge mess. I think my air conditioner was on, which is right above my table, and so it starts blowing everywhere. And I'm going to have some problems with that, but that's okay. I'd rather be cool with embossing powder blowing all over than super hot. It's pretty hot where I live. So I'm just taking a peek at this and making sure I'm pretty happy with the embossing. If you're not familiar with embossing, it is a fun technique, and it is where you heat this powder onto a panel after you stamp it. So I've got my heat tool, I got it pretty hot, and then I will start heating this, and when it starts to turn, you can see a little bit on that right edge, the color has changed. You need to be moving your heat tool because it will absolutely burn your paper and your powder. You'll know sometimes visually if you've done embossing before and you've kind of overcooked it, you'll smell it as well. It's not the best smell when it gets a little too hot. And I have burned plenty of embossing powder not paying attention over the years. But I've been doing embossing a long time. This was the first technique I ever learned outside of stamping. It was stamping, but instead of just stamping a sentiment, I learned how to stamp a sentiment, add some powder, and heat it. And it was love at first sight. So this is one of my absolute favorite techniques to use in card making. You can see a little bit of the shine from where that powder has melted, and you'll want to let that dry before you work with it. It will, just for a minute or two, it's still a little bit tacky sometimes, so just let that set up. I'm moving on. I've got the same stamp, and I'm going to do this in gold embossing powder. I'm pulling this out because I wanted you to be able to see how beautiful it is. The powder's just kind of meh when you see it in this application, but then when you apply that heat and it turns into this gold goodness. So just so beautiful and so much fun. And you also have texture to it. You can see a little bit of that in the camera, that when you run your hand across, it's raised a little bit. So that's a fun added element to embossing that I really, really enjoy. And I'm going to finish off. And again, I like to take a second and make sure I got everything, especially with a big panel like this. Sometimes I miss areas and I need to go back and heat it up just a second more to make sure I get it all. All right, now I've got a smaller piece of cardstock. This is going to be 4 by 5 1/4, a little bit smaller than an A2 sized. I've got the little mini leaf stamp that was included in your box, and I'm just going to do these 2 corners. instead of, you could make a whole background with this, but I'm just going to stick to doing my corners. And then I'm going to do some ink blending over it. Again, using that clear ink. And then I will bring my embossing powder back over here. And again, it's you might see a little bit of mess with it flying all over the place. And I also got a little bit of ink on the stamp. And so I'm going to brush that off. I usually keep a brush that I use for embossing because it's not always perfect. Sometimes you pick up a little bit of ink when you're, loading up your stamp. You may push too hard. There are a lot of little factors that can come into it. And having a paintbrush available that you use for this kind of application is a great way to kind of brush off any little stray pieces that might be on your cardstock. I've got a little bit more on that leaf, and then I will heat emboss that as well. This is such a beautiful, fun stamp. I think you could have a lot of fun with it, a lot of different techniques with this because of the size and just the way that you can kind of manipulate it around your cardstock in your projects. I think this would be so pretty to use to make some place cards for the holidays, for Thanksgiving. Just fold a piece of card up and add some heat embossed leaves on there, and then maybe you could leave room between the two to handwrite a name. I just think that would be something really pretty for a table. You can see that gold powder is heating up and starting to move, and this is a heat resistant craft mat. I don't hold it directly next to it. I kind of leave some space between so that air can flow, but that I'm not damaging my surface. So I'm going to come back to those. We'll revisit those in just a minute, but I wanted to make a tag for sure. There's all this gorgeous printed paper in the kit and in the Crafter Party box, I should say. And I'm going to glue this piece of paper. I have a die that cuts a tag shape. You could easily make this yourself, but I have a die that does this. So I cut a piece of cardstock and then I cut the same die with that paper. I loved this one with the pumpkins on it. It's got a little bit of writing, just kind of a rustic look to it. I added some of that no-show adhesive. I'm going to let that dry really well because I don't want it to move. And I've got some oxide inks here that I'm going to be using. I'm going to use Vintage Photo to start, and then also Walnut Stain. I've got my little mat down here so I can see my colors, and then I'm just going to work this ink around with my brush around the edges to kind of darken it up a little bit, make it look a little bit more rustic. I love to make tags for different occasions, certainly for Christmas and birthdays, but I thought this would be a beautiful fall tag to create. So I'm going to finish up on this one side with that lighter color, and then I'm going to darken this up a little bit more. And the oxide works beautifully on this printed paper. It took it very, very well. And I love the different colors in it. You could choose any of the colors. You could choose a green to go around the edges to pull out the green that you see, and an orange with the pumpkins. So depending on whatever ink you have, you could do a lot of different color shades with this tag. Okay, adding a little bit more there. And then I'm just going to kind of clean my brush off a little bit, but I'm not going to waste that ink. So I'm just going to run a little bit more around my tag. And I can write on the back of it as well because it's a solid color. If I had left it just the paper, I wouldn't have been able really to write on it. So that's another reason why I added it to cardstock. Okay, so I'm going to add a few little elements to this tag. I've got some cardstock here. I'm using my stamp positioner. I have some sticky grid paper in there. If you're not familiar with sticky grid, it comes, I know they have it in the store. I cut mine to a little bit smaller, but it has a temporary adhesive. It's sticky, but it'll allow you to move your paper, remove it without tearing, but it helps hold it in place. So since I've got this larger stamp, I kind of moved my paper over. I have found it is a great thing for my stamp press. It allows me to place something and then I don't have to worry about it moving on me. It's also great for if you've got a die cut and you've cut it out. Let's say it's a tag shape and you want to put the tag back in there. It's a great way to hold the tag, and then you can kind of move it around from there. So I just really enjoy having that sticky grid. You will see it in my stamp positioner all the time. All right, I use that beautiful stamp background from the large set that was included called Peace, Love, Fall. And then I'm going to trim that down and add another stamp piece on top. So you've got these autumn, fall, peace, love, fall. It's got a little coffee cup in there, a little pie, and this little tiny pumpkin. I really liked that. So I've got a cream color cardstock, and I'm going to add a stamp sentiment on top of there. And I will use my stamp positioner again for this so I can get it exactly where I want it to. So those little pumpkins are super cute. Those would be a great little stamp to create a background as well. You could stamp all over randomly your pumpkins and maybe color them different colors. You could use some non-traditional colors there. And I'm going to take my Copics here and I'm going to use a couple of oranges. I've got YR04, I should say, YR04. It's going to be my lighter color, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the shading because it's mostly just going to be that pretty orange, but I am going to add a little bit of darkness on a couple of those pieces of the pumpkin. All right, and then I'm going to start putting my tag together. I'm going to trim this down a little bit. I'm going to try and fit it where I haven't covered up all of the words. They've got a nice spacing between them. And then I'm just going to scoot this down and trim that off and hopefully have the words still visible. So I'm just kind of scooting that down and using my little my little paper cutter, I should say. I have a little handheld kind of paper cutter that is helpful for little pieces like that. All right, I'm back with a little bit more adhesive here. I'm going to glue this directly onto my panel of words, and then I can start finishing off this tag. But I think I love fall most of all, and I have to agree with this. Where I live, it's warm, and we really only have really two seasons. Hot, hotter, and then somewhat mild. Although we do have a winter, it can get chilly, but it's not for a long period of time. I don't live somewhere where you can put on a sweater in the morning and wear it the whole day. You could wear a sweater for the first 30 minutes out the door, and then you're going to need to take all of your layers off. So we're very big on layering, and we don't wear coats a lot. But we do have a nice season of fall. The light is so pretty. I love when it starts to shift and you can see it streaming in, and it just feels like fall. Okay, next I'm going to pull out some of these gorgeous gingham ribbons that was included, and then there's those really fun buttons. I have a lot of ideas for those buttons for future projects, but I'm going to use a few of them today. I'm just trying to choose which one I want to use. It's kind of like when you get a beautiful ribbon like this, I don't really want to use it. I just want to look at it, or I want to use just the tiniest little bit. So I'm being very judicious in which one I'm going to pick and how much of it I'm going to cut, because they are absolutely gorgeous. And I'm definitely going to do something with the red and black together. Those are our college team colors, so I'm definitely going to reserve some of that for a future project involving the college colors. Okay, so I've got these two pieces cut here, the yellow and the orange, and I'm going to thread those through. I've got to trim up a little bit of the ends to get them through, and then I will tie those off. This is the way I like to tie my tags together. I often leave pretty long tails on mine because I'll make a bunch of tags at one time, and then I'll hold on to them and use them for different things. Sometimes it might be a bottle of wine, it might be a bag, I don't know. So I like to leave enough room to be able to kind of manipulate the tag onto the gift that I want to give at that time. So it just gives me a little bit of flexibility, if that makes sense, to leave a little bit of what I call it the tail, the longer piece on the end. Okay, so I picked out 3 buttons out of that bag. Again, it was kind of hard to give those up too. I can be kind of stingy on my products. They're so cute. You don't want to use them, but I need to use them. So I'm making myself pull some out, and then I've got some glue dots here that I decided to use. They're perfect for an application like this to get these wooden buttons to stick. And I'm going to flip over that other wooden button. It depending on which side you had it on, it's kind of a different shade. So I chose a little bit of the lighter shade there to stick it on. So I'm going to stick those 3 on there, tying together that tag. And then the last step is going to be some gems. I always love these gems. And I misplaced my little pokey tool, the one that has the little wax tip. So I'm going to have to use my fingers here, which will take me an extra minute. But I'm going to add a couple of glue dots of glue, I should say, that no-show. And I am going to lay these onto my pumpkin and kind of stick them at the top of my stem just for a little extra bling on this tag. And I had them all turned the right way, but like I say, I misplaced my little sticky tool. It will turn up again once I clean my craft room. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that statement. Just keeping it real. It will be discovered again once I've cleaned up. And then that will finish off this tag. So just a fun way to use some inks and to use that printed paper and alter it a little bit and tie those buttons on as well. Okay, so moving on, my next project, I'm going to use one of those embossed backgrounds with the crackle background. Now, I love this paper with this kind of spooky house a little bit with the windows all lit up for Halloween or for a stormy night. And so I didn't want to use the whole piece because I wanted to use it with my crackle background. So I decided to just cut it apart. I'm going to do that on this card and another one coming up. I just thought I love the shapes that were included on these papers. And I just decided to trim that out because I wanted to have just a part of it, just the house, and not the whole piece of sky. So I took a pair of sharp scissors here. Most of my scissors are pretty dull, but I do have a couple of pair that I reserve for cutting paper like this when I need an actual really, really clean cut. Most of my scissors I use to cut cardstock in half. They're fairly inexpensive and then they dull out pretty quickly. But these are my kind of special put aside scissors that I know will work well for a project like this. And then I also cut out that little half moon, and I'm just kind of deciding where do I think I'm going to put this. And so I will take those little bits of paper away, and then while I'm putting this together, I liked the background a lot, but I wanted to soften it up a little bit. I thought the white was a little bit too stark for what I wanted. So another Distress Oxide will come out here. This is Faded Jeans. And I thought this would maybe give me a little bit of a spookier sky, so to speak. So I'm going to pull my sheet back out here, and then I'm going to start a little bit more of ink blending. And I thought the shade would be pretty with the color of the house, that spooky house. So I'm going to start at the top. The top will be a little bit darker, and then I'm going to fade it in to the background. And hopefully it will look a little bit like a spooky sky, so to speak. I left that there was a little bit of the edge. I left that white on purpose. And what I like about embossing as well, that I don't do this technique on camera, is to watercolor with it. You could put this onto a water-friendly paper, either a watercolor paper or a paper that really accepts a lot of water. And you can watercolor with it, and the raised edges of the embossing kind of helps keep it where you put it. So I like that too because you get a lot of control with your watercoloring. So it's just another fun technique that you can use with the embossing and your background stamps, any of your background stamps. Okay, so I'm happy with the background. I'm gonna add some adhesive here. I've got that silver cardstock that is so beautiful. I thought that pulled together nicely with the house and my spooky sky, so to speak. So I'm just going to lay that down. And again, these are slimline sized cards. So the finished product for mine is 8.5 by 3.5. You can make them any size you want, but I have found that this is a pretty standard size. Right now with these, I've added some foam tape to the back of my house, and I have popped that up, and then I'm going to add my half moon. I'm going to keep it on the side where it was, but I just love the way that turned out and the way that it opened up that background in a fun way. So I had been cutting again. I went ahead and did this off camera so you wouldn't have to watch me trim, but they turned out really beautiful, those pumpkins. And I've got another distress ink here. I think this is iced spruce. I know it's spruce. And it's actually more green than gray. I think the color that the camera picks up makes it look a little more gray. There is a gray in there for sure, but it's much prettier, I think, in person. And I'm just going to do ink blending on this. This is the white embossing powder that I used. And I'm just going to blend this in here. Again, using Bristol cardstock. I enjoy using that for blending. It's very forgiving and very smooth. Okay. And I will blend that on there. And then I'm going to have a little bit of some white spaces, but they're not super white. They're just kind of a soft color with the blending on there. And again, I'm going to be covering it with some pumpkins. So once I fill that in and I'm happy with that, then I can go to putting together my next slimline. And I'm just adding another layer there, a little bit darker at the top. Okay, so that's how that looks. And then I can add my pumpkins on there. But before I do that, I'm going to wipe this off. I've just got a napkin here, and you can see that the white pops right back out when I go over and rub my piece of paper towel over there. It really helps that white come back through, because it will pick up, when you ink blend like that, you will pick up some ink on top of your embossing. But since it's embossed, it will resist, and you can just rub that right back off. So that's a really nice way that you can make the color kind of come back on there. And I've run out of dry adhesive, so I'm going back to my liquid adhesive here. I've got this brown, and I'm going to lay that on there, and then my cardstock, it is Welsh Dragon, that beautiful blue card base. I thought it tied in well with the pumpkins and some of the shade that is included. And I also, when I cut apart those beautiful pumpkins, the detail is amazing on them. It looks like you colored it yourself, which I never could color something like that, I don't think. But they were so beautiful, and I wanted to use them in that way on their own. And I went ahead and added some foam tape to them. And now I'm going to add them back on to this panel of my slimline. So that's just a fun way to use it. I think there's some butterflies included in that pattern paper. You could do that. There's some really nice larger elements that you could cut out to create your own cards. This is an autumn that I stamped from that beautiful stamp set, and that is in Welsh Dragon as well. So that is another slimline card. So much fun. Okay, so then I pulled out the seed packets that were included, and I was just going to show you how I'm going to put this together. I've already folded this one, but I wanted to show you how easy it is to fold the other one. I've got that leaf background, and I'm just trying to decide how I want to put this together. So that says, that's so cute. It says pumpkin, and then it's Card Seed Company. That's really, really cute. So I just have a bone folder here. You could use a scoring tool if you wanted to, but I'll be honest, they really folded quite easily, kind of where the colors began and ended. So if you just kind of pinch it together, I got a pretty good fold. And then I was just able to fold it down and crease it nicely with my bone folder. And the same thing here, just kind of pinching it and then straightening up where I want it to go. So these are so much fun. And I'm not going to end up using this one after all. I thought I was, and that's why I was trimming it down, making sure I got the white off the edge of my seed packet because it was kind of showing. But I'm not going to end up using it. But I still wanted to show you how easily it comes together and folds particularly. So I've got this one here, and then I'm just going to fold that down with my bone folder. Need to have a bone folder. If you don't have one, you need one. They are great for card making. I highly recommend having a bone folder. You never know how you can use it. There's always something that needs a little attention. And a bone folder is a great tool to have. Okay, so again, just trying to figure out my layout here, and then I'm going to start gluing it together. But I'm showing you I want to add a little something on that edge. So once again, I'm going to pull out my mat and I'm going to do some more ink blending. This one's peeled paint. Again, using the Distress Oxide, it blends beautifully. And then I'm going to run this color around my edge. Now you'll see it's a very dark shade. And I didn't want it quite that dark, so I really kind of let off the amount of pressure that I used on my brush. That's another little tip and trick. If you've got a color that isn't exactly what you want, you really can, and you're using a brush, you really can control the color with the amount of pressure that you put on there. So you can lighten it up by not going quite so hard, and you can also, by increasing the pressure, you can go even darker. If you want to use one shade and then layer in, you can kind of get a nice range of color just by controlling the pressure. So again, I wanted mine a good bit lighter, and so I'm just kind of holding my edge up and not pushing directly onto my cardstock to get that beautiful green shade. And then I'll add a little bit more on those edges to really make them pop off. And then I'm going to leave the white open spot intentionally. You could absolutely blend that in if you wanted to, and then you could wipe off any excess ink that was on top of your gold embossing. So now I'm ready to put this together. I've cut some card layers here. I've got orange and green, and I am going to add a little bit of glue here on these, just a couple of dots on those little smaller pieces, and then I'll add a little bit more on these outer edges that are going to allow me to close up my little seed packet. So cute, and the color is so vibrant. They're so well done and just a lot of fun. You can do a lot of fun things with them. I've got a little stamp here, and I'm going to cut down a piece of a lighter green cardstock than my card base, and again using my little mini trimmer here, and then I'm going to kind of measure. This is the way I do it. I don't use rulers too much. I just kind of take it over and hope I don't cut part of the stamp off, just kind of guesstimating there and hoping that it's straight. Looks pretty good. And then I can add some ink to that and finish stamping that off using some lighter color there. And I love that stamp. I am so glad that I live in a world where there are Octobers. That's from Anne of Green Gables. Such a beautiful quote from that book and the movie series. I think I've read at least the first book. I know there was a series of them. I know I watched all the movies, but they were enjoyable. Okay, I'm going to add this to my orange cardstock. This is an A2 size card, so I've been working with the slim lines, which are the 3.5 by 8.5. This is what I would call a traditional A2 sized card, which is 4.25 by 5.5 is my finished card. And now I can come back here. I've added some foam tape to my sentiment and to my sweet little seed packet there, the sweet little pumpkin that's kind of sitting amongst the leaves of that beautiful background stamp. And there we go. There's another one. Just having so much fun with those backgrounds. And then I wanted to recap. So those are the 3 projects I made. I made that beautiful tag. The autumn, actually I made 4, now I think about it. Got the autumn card with that ink blended background. And then by cutting out the different things, I did add an eek to mine. I had a word die that said eek, and I cut that from a piece of glitter paper, black glitter paper, to finish that card off for Halloween. And then here is the one with the seed packet ready for mailing. And then there were all those beautiful stencils included in your kit. And I wanted to show you a couple of finished cards with that. So this was that beautiful layering wreath that had all those gorgeous leaves on there. And I added a couple of the stamps. Here's the little scarecrow here. He's so cute with his corn. And it has the green grass underneath. And then added a stamp on there. And then here is this adorable pumpkin. I added a trick-or-treat stamp that I had in my stash. But isn't that a fun pumpkin? So I just wanted to show you a few of these. I didn't have time to make them on camera, but I definitely wanted you to see them so you would kind of know what it looks like when you have a chance to use it yourself. And I'm sure there'll be lots of inspiration today to get you crafting and all of these little products and projects coming your way. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great time at the crafter party, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.